So in Acts chapter 10, there's this guy named Cornelius, and he's a first-generation believer. And this is a powerful thing for him, and he's seeing God at work in his life. And maybe you're like this, where your family, they're not Christians, they're not believers, and you're a first-generation believer. And the scriptures say that he's a generous man. He gives generously to his local community, and he's just seeing God show up. But his family, they're Gentiles, right? They're all from a Gentile heritage, which is a non-Jewish heritage. Well, one day God speaks to Cornelius and says, hey, I want you to send for Peter. And this would have been absolutely scandalous to think about, that this Jew would come to his house. This is something that was not okay. It was unlawful to do. I mean, God is calling him to push some cultural norms and to send for Peter. He's a Roman soldier. He has some guys that work for him, so he sends these guys to go find Peter. Well, Peter has this vision from God. And in the vision, there's this sheet that comes out of heaven, and it's full of these animals. And God says, hey, take and eat of these animals. Well, the problem is, Peter spent his whole life avoiding eating these unclean animals. And God's like, hey, it's okay, eat of these animals. Peter says, no, God, I would never do that. And God says, don't call what I've called clean, unclean. So Peter gets the picture, realizes God's up to something. Well, then he finds out there's these soldiers walking around. He goes, hey, I'm the guy you're looking for. He goes with them to Cornelius's house. And as he walks in the door, Cornelius, he drops his face to the floor. And Peter says, hey, get up. Get up. God has told me that I should call no man common or unclean. And in that moment, he publicly confesses before all these people that Peter has a racial bias. He confesses his ethnocentrism before these people, has the humility to admit that something about what he had in his heart and believed about even his faith in God was keeping him from the mission God had him on. And I wonder for you today, and for me, if we could just be honest and say, God, would you show us anything that's keeping us from the mission that you have us on? Any bias or belief system that's keeping us from loving others, loving everyone of all backgrounds. You see, when we hear about Jews and Gentiles in the scriptures, I think we miss that the Jew and Gentile tension wasn't just a religious tension, this was a racial tension. People from different backgrounds coming together as God's beautiful, multifaceted family. And so let's just be honest today and say, God, would you show us anything that's keeping us from the mission that you have us on? In Matthew chapter 28, the Great Commission says that we should go to all nations, preaching the good news of the gospel. And that word nations, it's not just about locations. It's actually the word ethnicities, that we should go to all ethnicities preaching the gospel. And so we want to be the kind of church that doesn't let any of our biases or backgrounds keep us from the mission that God has us on. And so let's ask God to be really honest with us today.